I laughed when the process server handed me those papers, not because anything was amusing, but because the titanium rod in my spine had kept me flat on my back for the past 4 months. My hands shook as I read the very first line. Notice of legal action for harassment and stalking. My ex-wife, Linda Parker, was suing me for allegedly following her across Ontario, appearing at her workplace in Ottawa, her sister's cottage in Muskoka, and outside her physiotherapy clinic in Kingston. The dates were all listed, precise and damning, from March through June 2024. Those were the exact months I had been recovering from spinal fusion surgery at Toronto General Hospital. My name is Daniel Brooks. I'm 63 years old. And until that lawsuit landed in my lap, I believed the worst chapter of my life had already been written. My construction company had collapsed 3 years earlier when our biggest client went bankrupt, owing us $840,000. The domino effect wiped out everything. The business, the house in Oakville, my 28-year marriage to Linda, and eventually, my health. The stress compressed my vertebrae so badly that by last February I could barely stand upright. Surgery was the only option. But here's what made the lawsuit feel so absurd. It was almost surreal. On every single date, Linda claimed I had been stalking her. I had been lying in a hospital bed. I was on the 7th floor of Toronto General, unable to walk more than 10 feet without collapsing. My surgeon, Dr. Aaron Collins, had been very clear about the recovery timeline. 12 weeks minimum before attempting stairs, 16 weeks before driving. The lawsuit arrived in week 17. I called my lawyer, Ethan Miller, immediately. Ethan had handled my bankruptcy case and knew the full ugly history of my divorce. When I read him the allegations over the phone, there was a long pause. "Daniel, this is actually good news," he finally said. "Good news?" I replied. "My ex-wife is accusing me of criminal harassment." "Good news because you have airtight proof. You couldn't have done this. Hospital records, nursing logs, security footage. You were monitored around the clock for 4 months. This case will be dismissed in 5 minutes. I wanted to believe him, but Ethan hadn't seen what I had found inside the envelope. Linda had included photographs, 12 of them, printed in color. In every single one, a man who looked disturbingly like me stood somewhere in the background. Same height, around 6'1", same build, even though I'd lost weight during recovery, same receding gray hairline, the same wire-rimmed glasses I'd worn for 15 years. In one photo taken outside a Starbucks in Ottawa, the man was even wearing a navy windbreaker identical to one I owned. "She has pictures, Ethan," I said. "Someone who looks exactly like me." Another pause. "Email them to me," he said. "We'll handle it. In the meantime, start documenting everything. Pull your hospital records, visitor logs, everything." That evening, I went through my phone. Every text message, every call log, every email from February through June. My daughter Emily had visited twice a week. My son Ryan had flown in from Seattle once. My brother Mark came by every Sunday. Aside from that, my entire social world during those months consisted of nurses, physiotherapists, and the elderly man in the next bed who watched game shows at full volume. The lawsuit demanded $200,000 in damages for emotional distress and requested a restraining order. The court date was set for August 15th, 6 weeks away. Linda's lawyer had filed in Ottawa, 3 hours from my apartment in Toronto. Even traveling that far would have been agonizing for my back. That night, I couldn't sleep, not because of the pain, though there was plenty of it, but because of how wrong it all felt. Linda and I had our problems. The business failure had poisoned everything between us. She blamed me for not having stronger contracts, for trusting the wrong people, for losing the comfortable life she'd grown used to. By the time she filed for divorce, we could barely sit in the same room. But stalking, harassment, that wasn't me. It never had been. I went back through the photos with a magnifying glass. In the Ottawa Starbucks image, the man's face was partially visible in profile. The resemblance was uncanny. Same nose, same jawline, but something felt off. The way he stood, his shoulders slightly hunched forward. I had spent months in physiotherapy learning to stand straight to protect my spine. This man's posture was completely wrong. The next morning, I called Toronto General's records department. Getting copies of everything took 3 days and $200 in administrative fees, but it was worth it. 416 pages, documenting every minute of my hospital stay. Admission on February 12th at 6 a.m. Surgery lasting 9 hours. Post-op complications involving infection that required an extended ICU stay. Transfer to the recovery ward on February 28th. Discharge on June 8th, exactly 117 days after admission. The nursing logs were especially detailed. Every 4 hours, a nurse checked on me, recording vital signs, medications, and meals. I'd been on a morphine drip for the first 3 weeks, couldn't walk to the bathroom without help for 6 weeks, and hadn't even left the hospital floor until week 14, when I was wheeled down for a CT scan. Ethan Miller reviewed everything, and then scheduled a call with Linda's lawyer, a woman named Karen Holt. I listened on speakerphone as Ethan calmly laid out our defense. He explained that his client had been hospitalized during every date mentioned in the complaint, and that we had detailed medical records proving I was physically incapable of being in Ottawa, Muskoka, or Kingston during that time. Karen's voice was sharp. She said they had photographic evidence and eyewitness testimony. 6 different people had confirmed seeing Daniel Brooks at those locations. Ethan corrected her immediately. 6 people had identified someone who looked like me. There was a difference. She insisted the photographs were clear and added that they also had records of concerning phone calls made to her client during that period, calls from my phone number. My stomach dropped. I had called Linda exactly twice during my hospital stay. Once to tell her about the surgery. Once to let her know I'd survived it. Both calls lasted under 2 minutes and were strictly informational. "What calls?" I asked, breaking my silence. "Mr. Brooks," Karen replied, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Lovely to hear from you. My client received 17 calls from your number between March and June. She wisely chose not to answer them. Your voicemails were disturbing." "That's impossible," I said. "Check the phone records. I made 2 calls in 4 months." "We have her phone records, Mr. Brooks," she replied. "They tell a very different story." When the call ended, Ethan looked genuinely concerned. He said we needed my phone records immediately, and that we had to figure out who this lookalike was. I asked him if he believed me. He said he believed the hospital records, but someone had gone to serious effort to make it look like I was involved. This wasn't random. It was targeted. That afternoon, I requested my phone records from Rogers. While waiting for them, I started thinking about who might want to frame me. The bankruptcy had left a trail of resentment, subcontractors who'd lost money, suppliers stuck with unpaid invoices, former employees who'd lost their jobs. But 3 years had passed. Why now? And why through Linda? Then I remembered something. During one of Emily's visits in April, she'd mentioned that Linda had a new boyfriend, someone she'd met at her book club in February, right before my surgery. Emily hadn't met him, but said Linda seemed happier than she had in years. I remembered asking his name. It was something like Kevin. Kevin Marshall, I thought. I opened my laptop and searched Kevin Marshall, Ottawa. Nothing useful. I tried Kevin Marshall, Toronto. Still nothing. I was about to give up when another thought hit me. What if he wasn't local? What if they'd met online instead of at a book club? I logged into Facebook for the first time in months and checked Linda's friends list. There he was, Kevin Marshall. His profile photo showed a man in his late 50s, graying hair, slim build, standing in front of a canal overseas. I clicked through his photos and my blood ran cold. Kevin Marshall looked like he could be my brother. Not identical, but close enough. Same height based on the photos, similar facial features, similar glasses, even the same hairstyle, or what little hair was left. I took screenshots and sent them to Ethan immediately, then called him. "Tell me I'm not crazy," I said. "Look at this guy." "That's concerning," Ethan replied. "Very concerning. Where did you find him?" "He's Linda's new boyfriend. She met him right before my surgery." Ethan went quiet for a moment. He said it might not be a coincidence, but we had to be careful. We couldn't accuse anyone without proof. I told him all I knew, that the man lived in Ottawa. He said he'd start digging and reminded me that my phone records should arrive the next day. Those would tell us a lot. The records arrived by email the following morning. I printed all 68 pages and went through them line by line. The calls Karen mentioned weren't there. According to Rogers, I had made exactly 2 calls to Linda's number. March 3rd at 2:47 p.m., lasting 1 minute and 43 seconds. March 4th at 9:12 a.m., lasting 2 minutes and 6 seconds. Nothing else. I called Ethan immediately. He said that meant someone had spoofed my number, making it appear as though the calls were coming from me. He explained that this was actually easier to prove than people realize. If I was in the hospital and the calls originated from Ottawa, cell tower data would confirm it. I asked why anyone would go to such lengths. He said that was exactly what we needed to uncover. He then mentioned a private investigator he trusted, Lucas Reed, a former RCMP officer, and suggested we bring him in. I met Lucas Reed at a Tim Hortons near my apartment 2 days later. He was a large man in his mid-50s, with careful movements that suggested a life spent seeing things that leave scars. I showed him everything: the lawsuit, the photographs, Kevin Marshall's Facebook profile, my phone records, and my hospital documentation. He studied the photos for a long time, occasionally pulling out a jeweler's loupe to examine small details. Finally, he said this was sophisticated work. These weren't random snapshots. The angles and lighting were intentional. Whoever took them knew what they were doing and wanted clear, usable images. I asked if he thought someone had hired a photographer. He said he believed this had been planned carefully. When I told him what little I knew about Kevin Marshall, Lucas made notes and promised a full background check. 3 days later, he called me back. He said Kevin Marshall didn't exist. I told him that was impossible. I'd seen his Facebook page. Lucas replied that I'd seen a Facebook page created 11 months ago. The profile picture was stock photography from a modeling agency in Toronto. The other photos had been stolen from various social media accounts. Kevin Marshall was a fake identity. My mind was spinning. Who was he really? Who was Linda dating? That was the question. I reached out to some friends in Ottawa law enforcement, asking them to discreetly check if Linda had been seen with anyone matching the description. They found something. A man named Kevin Dutton, 58 years old, had a record. 2 prior stalking charges in British Columbia. Both cases settled out of court. He had moved to Ontario last year. Jesus Christ. Linda was dating a stalker. It appeared so. And get this, Dutton didn't look anything like the man in the photos or like me. He was 5'7", heavyset, with a full head of dark hair. But he had experience in surveillance, harassment, and manipulating situations. The pieces were falling into place, yet the picture they formed made no sense. Why would he frame me for stalking Linda if he was the one dating her? Marcus leaned back in his chair. Maybe she doesn't know what he's doing. Maybe he's playing both of you. Stalkers are obsessive and paranoid. They see threats everywhere. You're the ex-husband. In his mind, you're competition. But you've been in a hospital bed, which makes you the perfect target. You can't defend yourself. You can't investigate. He probably assumed you'd just settle, pay Linda, and disappear. We need to tell Linda. She should know what kind of person she's with. Not yet. If we tip him off, he'll vanish. We need proof he's the one in these photos, and I think I know how to get it. Marcus's plan was simple but risky. He wanted to conduct surveillance on Kevin Dutton and see if he made another move. Meanwhile, Ethan filed our response to the lawsuit, including all my hospital records and the discrepancies in the phone records. He also filed a motion requesting cell tower data for the alleged calls to Linda. The response rattled them. 2 days later, Karen Holt called Ethan requesting a meeting. We met at her office in Ottawa, a glass tower overlooking the river. Linda was there, looking older than I remembered, somehow harder. Karen sat beside her, and across the table sat a man I'd never seen before. 5'7", heavy-set, dark hair. Kevin Dutton. "This is my client's partner, Mr. Dutton," Karen said. "He's been helping support her through this difficult time." I kept my face neutral, but my heart raced. This was the man impersonating me, stalking Linda while making it look like I was responsible. And here he was, sitting across from me, playing the supportive boyfriend. Ethan laid out our defense step by step. Hospital records, nursing logs, security footage showing me in the recovery ward, phone records showing only 2 calls, the impossibility of me being in multiple cities while bedridden. Linda's face went pale as the evidence mounted. She kept glancing at Kevin, who maintained a concerned, supportive expression. "Miss Holt," Ethan said, "someone went to considerable effort to make it appear my client was stalking Mrs. Parker. Someone who looks like him, someone who spoofed his phone number. This isn't mistaken identity. This is identity fraud and criminal harassment, not by my client." "That's absurd," Karen said, though her voice had lost its edge. "Is it?" Ethan replied. We request that all parties submit to forensic analysis, including Mr. Dutton here. If someone's impersonating my client, surely you want to find out who." Kevin's expression cracked for a second, a flash of something dark. "I don't see why I need to submit to anything," he said. "I'm not the one being accused of stalking." "No," I said, speaking directly to him for the first time. "But you are the one who did it." The room erupted. Karen demanded we retract the accusation. Linda looked between Kevin and me, confused and frightened. Kevin stood up, face flushed. "I don't have to listen to this. Patricia, we're leaving." But Marcus Webb chose that moment to enter the conference room. He'd been waiting outside, and Ethan had texted him our signal. Marcus placed a folder on the table. "Kevin Dutton, also known as Kevin Marshall, also known as Dennis Maxwell," Marcus said, "wanted in British Columbia on 2 counts of aggravated stalking, violated a restraining order in Vancouver last year." He laid a photograph on the table. Taken 3 days ago, it showed Kevin entering a costume shop in Ottawa, purchasing a gray wig and wire-rimmed glasses. Linda gasped. Kevin bolted for the door, but Marcus was faster. In 3 steps, he had Kevin pinned against the wall, arm twisted behind his back through the glass partition. 2 Ottawa police officers entered the office. Linda didn't understand. "Kevin," she said. "He had nothing to do with this," Kevin tried to explain as the officers cuffed him. "I was protecting her from you. You're the threat. You're the one who—" "I was in a hospital bed," I said quietly. Over the next few weeks, the full story finally came out. Kevin Dutton had created the Dennis Maxwell persona to get close to Linda Parker. He'd researched her online, learned about her divorce, and deliberately presented himself as exactly the kind of man she'd be drawn to after years with me, stable, attentive, and seemingly successful. But Kevin had a deep, pathological jealousy toward anyone from his target's past lives. He'd done this before in British Columbia, where one woman's ex-boyfriend had been driven to a suicide attempt after relentless harassment that was made to look like it was coming from her. When Kevin learned about my surgery, he saw his opening. Make me look like a stalker while I was physically helpless. Drive a permanent wedge between Linda and me. Ensure I could never be part of her life again. He hired a photographer friend from Vancouver, someone who owed him money, to follow Linda and capture images where a man resembling me could appear in the background. The photographer wore a wig, wire-rimmed glasses, and clothing similar to mine. They coordinated everything through encrypted messaging apps, convinced they were being clever. The phone spoofing was even simpler. Online services allowed Kevin to make calls that appeared to come from my number. Using that, he left increasingly disturbing voicemails for Linda, playing the role of an obsessed ex-husband. Linda saved them all, and police later seized them as evidence. When investigators searched Kevin's apartment, they found a wall covered in photographs of Linda, hundreds of them, dating back months before they'd supposedly met. There were surveillance notes, schedules, routines, and lists of her favorite places. He'd been stalking her long before he ever introduced himself at that book club. The charges against Kevin stacked up quickly: identity theft, criminal harassment, fraud, and violations of restraining orders from British Columbia. His bail was set at $100,000, which he couldn't post. 3 weeks after Kevin's arrest, Linda came to see me. I was doing physiotherapy at a clinic near my apartment, slowly rebuilding my strength. She waited until my session ended, then asked if we could talk. We sat in a quiet corner of the waiting room. She looked exhausted. "I'm dropping the lawsuit," she said. "And I'm sorry, Daniel. I'm so sorry. I should have known you wouldn't do this. You're not that kind of person." She explained how real it had all seemed. The photos, the calls, how convincing Kevin had been. She said she felt stupid. Then she started crying. Despite everything, I felt sorry for her. She'd been manipulated just as much as I had, maybe more. "This wasn't your fault," I told her. "He's done this before. He's a professional at manipulation." She nodded and said the police told her Kevin had been watching her for months before they ever met, learning everything, planning every step. We talked for nearly an hour, really talked, for the first time in years. She told me about the fear she'd felt, believing I was following her, how unsafe she'd felt in her own city. I told her about the betrayal of being accused while lying helpless in a hospital bed, unable to defend myself. "What's going to happen to him?" she asked. I told her Ethan Miller believed Kevin was facing serious prison time. Between the violations from BC and what he did here, likely 8 to 10 years. She nodded slowly and said that was good. People needed protection from someone like him. The lawsuit was formally dropped in September. Ethan filed a countersuit against Kevin for defamation, identity theft, and emotional distress. We'll probably never see any money from it, but it's on Kevin's record. Linda moved temporarily to her sister's cottage in Muskoka. She needed distance from Ottawa and from the memories. We exchange occasional texts now, nothing deep, just checking in. The marriage is over, and it will stay that way, but we're not enemies anymore. We survived something together, even if we didn't realize it at the time. My back is slowly improving. I'm up to walking 40 minutes a day now, starting to think about what comes next. Maybe teaching construction management at a community college, something that uses my experience without destroying what's left of my spine. This whole experience taught me something I wish I'd understood years ago. When someone tries to destroy your reputation, the truth may not be immediately obvious to others, but it's your strongest weapon. Documentation, evidence, facts. Those matter more than emotions or assumptions. Linda believed Kevin because what he gave her felt true, but feeling true isn't the same as being true. I also learned that predators like Kevin count on their victims being isolated and unable to fight back. He chose me because I was in a hospital bed, because he believed I was powerless. What he didn't expect was that even from that bed, I could still gather evidence, still build a defense, still find people like Ethan and Marcus Webb who believed in the truth. And here's what I tell younger people whenever I get the chance. Technology can be weaponized against you, phone numbers spoofed, photos manipulated, identities stolen, but that same technology also leaves records, digital trails, cell tower data, timestamps that don't lie. In my case, hospital monitoring systems, phone records, and security cameras saved me. I'm still rebuilding my life at 63, still recovering, still processing everything that happened. But I'm here, I'm free, my name is clear. Kevin Dutton is facing justice, and Linda is safe from him. Sometimes the system works, but only if you fight for yourself, document everything, and refuse to accept false accusations, no matter how convincing they may seem. Truth has weight that lies can't match, not in the long run. You just have to hold on until that weight finally tips the scales in your favor. And that titanium rod in my spine is a permanent reminder that even when life breaks you down, with the right support and enough time, you can become strong enough to stand again.